Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Ricky Rocket's with us today. And if you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Jason's engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. Welcome, Rick.
Good morning, Vincent. I love it when you feel good in the morning like this. It makes my heart glad.
Well, you know, I'm thinking soon it's going to be open season on politicians, and you know.
I know. Isn't that going to be lock and load?
Yeah. I had a question. Oh, I want to say thank you. A package came in the mail from you and Julie. I really appreciate it. It was very kind, very nice. So I just want to say thank you.
East of Oregon.
Yeah, wow, very, very nice. I had a question for you, kind of a personal question. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to. So making coffee, do you have a preferred way of making coffee? I'm thinking like
Absolutely.
There's a French.
Yes. As you may or not know, I was, at one time, part of Starbucks. I had Northwest Botanicals and became the third partner as a spice provider over Crescent and several other large spice companies. And then when Zev died, Larry ended up selling to the new owner. That what he did to make Starbucks so famous was that he put it on United Airlines for free and shipped it into New York City. And that's the beginning of how that franchise started. He gave it free. Now, the way I brew coffee, because I've been doing it a long time, I was the one that broke Superior's monopoly on Kona coffee when I brought it into Portland with a single cargo box from 19 growers that were growing coffee on the Big Island. I put a cargo box together because at one time Chicago Superior owned a monopoly on the coffee that came from Ethiopia, Jamaica, and Hawaii. It is, first off, the minerals in the soil are exceptionally different in terms of the way the coffee actually tastes. And that's why they have different coffees from different parts of the world, is the minerals. Now, the Kona coffee has a flavor to it. The problem is coffee ransates within 20 minutes of brewing. The oils and carbohydrates change from the LDH to LD to L, serious poisonous carbohydrates. And so old coffee or freezing coffee is actually not good for your body. You know, the military form of the coffee spoons, stay straight up in the coffee cup. That is strong coffee. That is not a good coffee. I use Melita. That means the hotter the water that hits the finer cut on your coffee bean will give you the best flavor and will last for about 20 minutes, and then it becomes slowly over a period of 2 hours toxic. So I have fresh ground coffee that I try to make as fine as possible, the particle, not large, but fine particle, and then I try to hit it with steaming, hot, whistling coffee pouring it right directly in. And then what I do, I don't put milk or half and half in or sugar. I like a little bit of hot cocoa. So I put a little bit of cocoa in with my coffee. And with that, I have a double double Dutch type of mocha that I prefer. That's the way I like to drink my coffee. Other people have other ways of doing it. They're all different, and they will cup differently. But that's the way I do it. And I have only a single cup each day because, as you may or not know, coffee in itself, with the caffeine, the theobromine, methylamine, and all the other chemistries that are in it, are actually really not that good for you. They start my engine. That's my first joy of the morning, and carbohydrates and sugars. And, of course, if you're doing blood panels, you should not drink coffee before you have your blood panel because it will change your blood sugar ratios.
Okay, so a couple other questions, follow-up questions. So since you use the Melita, I assume that you mean the Melita cone filter system.
Yes, you have a cone where you put your fresh coffee in, and then you hit it with boiling water. And the hotter that water is, the better it'll cup.
Okay. And so then the next question is, for the filter, do you use the white filter that's bleached?
An unbleached, I don't know what color it is. They call it natural, but it isn't. It's off gray, brown filter, unbleached, because I don't want bleach in my coffee.
I agree. And the reason I asked that question is so our class would know that the white filters are toxic. They're absolutely toxic because they are bleached and
well, they'll attack your gums, and they'll attack your plaque. They'll attack everything on your teeth. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the next question about the filters is, over the years, I've experimented with, the cheap filters are the white ones. That's the kind the restaurants use. The more expensive filters, probably 2 or 3 times the price each, would be the brown.
Well, not in Safeway stores and others. They should and normally are the same price. There should be no price variance on that because to get them natural is actually produced cheaper. And so I've not found them to be more expensive. I just get the unbleached. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, they're more expensive.
Is a technique for paper, but you're not using paper. What you're using is a filter, and a filter is a different kind of paper.
Yes. Now, the Melita filter is way thicker, way more textured, and there's a longer path for the fluid to go through the filter media of a Melita filter than there is of the cheap basket filters.
The cheap one. I'm always into the saving of pennies rather than going the extra minute. I use them so infrequently in that once a day that it's not, from that point of view, I cut corners and go for an inexpensive, as cheap as I can get it, dollar store variety from Safeway or someone equivalent. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other question I have is that over the years I've experimented with what appears to be a gold-plated, very, very fine mesh, reusable coffee filter basket.
That's still going to collect chemicals and or other things that are in your water, because most people are drinking from city water, and city water itself is toxic. And so well waters are quite different and predicated on what part of the world you're from. If you're out of South Dakota, your water comes out of the ground white. And so believe that or not, because of the lime. There's, all of these are arguments. What you're trying to do is stay healthy. By the way, I just returned from my doctor's 2 days ago with blood panels and, the urine and all the rest of it. And I apparently, according to him, am healthier this morning than I've ever been in the 35 years I've been with that doctor. He said that everything was down, including my PSAs, my cholesterol, and all of that is from choosing the right things to eat. I'm not fanatical, and I have not used a supplement in more than 2 years. Once I quit with Aloha Medicinals, I stopped taking cordyceps, which in some ways I regret because I never felt better than when I was taking that, that polysaccharide in there. But candidly, I'm healthier today than ever before, and according to my systems of calculation. I, by just eating correctly, may live to 130.
Well, that'd be great. That would be great.
Really, there's no reason. And here's the weird part. Every year, like last year, it was Matt Stein that died at Christmas. This year, it was my friend Mahala Marshall-Rood. I talked with her that morning, and by the afternoon, she was gone. I had no clue. It was unexpected. She had an acute celiac disease that may have prompted the coma or whatever that she fell into. I don't know. Nobody really does know at this point. She's out of Texas. But Mahala has been my friend since I was teaching metaphysics at Harvard, 1990. And I'm shocked. And I'm watching my friends all around me dying while I seemingly am like Raymond Reddington on Blacklisted. I just keep going on and on, somehow defying everything and getting healthier. And basically, if you want to know the truth of it, theoretically, all aspects of aging are not stoppable. They are literally reversible. And with the right kind of mind and temperament, that you could live 180 years old, truly. Kind of like Spock.
So what are you eating in your new revised diet that makes you feel this way?
Vegetables, fruits. I stopped shopping at Walmart because the food was much cheaper, but the produce section is terrible. And I found that going to the more expensive stores like Albertsons, over Safeway even, that the fruits and produce that I'm eating are fresher, more from the United States rather than imported from other countries, and that they're not trying to make fruit look ripe. It is ripe. And that's the difference, that where the food literally came from. And I have embraced Gurdjieff when he said to eat your environment. If you live in the Midwest, that would be grains. If you lived on the coast, that would be fish. And as a metaphor. And to, that you don't have to be lacto-ovo-vegetarian. I was a lacto-ovo-vegetarian for years. And I discovered that I'm healthier because I'm type O negative blood, and blood types do make a difference in terms of what will metabolize certain kinds of enzymes. And so I found that I need some kind of meat or fish or protein in my diet that does not come from simply beans or rice. And so just choosing the right foods and making certain that they're fresh and cooking them fresh. I stir fries and that kind of thing. And I'm going to live very healthy. I found that I use more butter today. I use more milk today than ever before in my diet. Now, all of those are carbohydrates, and yet my carbohydrate or my cholesterols are way down. I'm less than 120. I'm like 112 or something like that in my blood panels. So how do you do that?
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Alan Miller's with us, class. If you'd like to go to the website, richardalanmiller.com, richardalanmiller.com. Rick, you were saying that you're drinking more milk and eating more butter, and so am I. And it's the most interesting phenomenon that I have been experiencing, and that is that our instructors are doing the same things without communicating in advance with each other. So I've been doing the same thing. Our son came home from shopping one day, and he said, I bought some butter. And I said, well, great. He said it was on sale. I said, it was great. I think it was $1.49 a pound. I said, well, how many did you get? He said 10 cases.
So when I bought fruit at Walmart, I found that half the fruit I was purchasing, I ended up not eating. The peel didn't peel right, like on the orange, the papains in my papaya, Nothing tasted right. And then I went to Fred Meyer, which is a local competitor. The food is possibly half again as much money, and the fruit was fresher. It hadn't been hit with kerosene to make it look ripe so that it could sit there longer or in freight coming from another country. And like the pears that I sent you, they came from Oregon. And that is what I'm trying to do, is eat more local. And while it often is half again as much more money, you actually get twice as much value, which means for half again as much, you get twice as much nutrient. And that's what I'm discovering now. The stuff that's grown in America is different than from grown in other countries. It doesn't taste, the tastes are different, not just the quality of the food and the minerals and or supplement aspects of it. It's healthier. Now, there's a reason why I use the farmer's market and try to buy from local. It's more expensive, but you're supporting an infrastructure that at some point is going to become critical. Your local growers in the farmers markets are more important than anybody truly realizes. And these are going to be the people that save the communities when and if a grid situation goes down. And so I try to eat, and the other thing, I don't eat nearly as much in breads. That's another thing. The American diet has always been meat and potatoes, and I try to eat more fruit and vegetables, lighter, where you have the volume but not the impact on the gut. And baked goods are the desserts. They're what is making America obese. And Oregon is 1 in 4 people in Oregon is not overweight. They're obese. And I went last year from 244 pounds. I'm now down to 208. And my goal is to be 198 before the end of next year. I'm taking it off very slowly, because if you take it off too fast, you put it right back on. Why? The body has memory and will always try to go back to where it was stationary. And it's the same with weight. And so if you take it off slowly, it's because of your eating habits, not because of drugs.
My mom was very, very careful with what she ate, and there were three children in her family. So my mom, her sister, and her brother. And my mom was the most careful with what she ate, and my mom lived way longer. I'm thinking easily 20% longer than her brother and sister. And
just because of food choices alone.
Mm-hmm.
I know you get habits in flavor, like sugar is an addictive behavior that can easily be changed. And the distinction between sucrose and fructose sugars are orders of magnitude. I no longer buy sugar by the pound again like I used to and have a big jar full of it. In fact, I very rarely use it, even on cereal. What I'll do is get my sugar from the fruit I add to the cereal. There's different ways of approaching the situation, and it takes 3 months to change a habit.
We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. You know, Rick, if you ask Norm Shealy, so Dr. Shealy, what do you think about fast food? He'd say, he'd say one of two things. He'd say, McDonald's, poison. Or he would say, fast food, well, that's a handful of fruit and nuts.
You know, my goal is to be like Norm Shealy when I become his age. He is the only person I've ever met that literally walks his talk, literally, and you can see it in his eyes. I'm very impressed with Norm Shealy. He, for me, is my role model.
Yeah. Yeah, he goes to work. He gets up like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. It's Ben Franklin, early to bed, early to rise. That's what he does. Exercises about 90 minutes a day. Eats very healthy.
He walks his talk.
Yeah, he does.
And you can see it. You can see it. And so that's my goal. If I can be like Norm Shealy when I'm his age, I will have felt like I've accomplished my goal.
He's almost 90. He's just south of 90. Yeah. Okay, so we were talking about coffee, and here's what I'd like to understand a little better. So during the broadcast, I will get a cup of coffee and put it in one of these dark black USA coffee mugs, and I will sip on it throughout the entire broadcast. Now, according to what I heard you say, it is going rancid during the broadcast of 2 hours.
Well, at some point in a 2-hour period, yes, it's not healthy. You need to consume it within the first 40 minutes. Once you've, 40 minutes, I wouldn't let coffee stand longer than that from fresh brew, in my humble opinion. And I had a laboratory where I would actually look at the coffee under a microscope to see the chemical changes over a time. And coffee ransates. That's why you keep it refrigerated, always. You don't keep it on the counter. It goes in the freezer.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. So there are a few brands of coffee that are packaged in metal cans, top, bottom, and the cylinder, all metal. And they're vacuum packed so that when you remove the lid with a can opener, not one of these peel and seal kind of things, but a can opener, you can hear the vacuum, the air rushing in. Now,
that's when it begins its process of ransating. Otherwise, it's held in stasis.
Okay, that was my question. So if I have a can of Cain's, C-A-I-N, coffee from, it's packaged by Farmers Market, I believe. It's in a steel can. It's available at Sam's Club. That coffee, if it's 5 years old, is it as good if it has not leaked as it was?
Well, there is a shelf life, but once it's in stasis with no air or light, there's nothing to cause it to have chemical changes. Those are the two, moisture are the things that, and when it's exposed to air, it has access to all of that then, light and so on. If it's in vacuum sealed, dehydrated and so on, there's no way for it to go bad.
Okay, well, this is not
the expiration date.
Okay,
a lot of our products have expiration dates on it. Those should be, I would say, honored up to a certain point, canned goods. But in the apocalypse movies, they're eating stuff that's 50 and 60 years old. And actually, if they're canned correctly, will hold stasis. Once opened, that's different. Then it goes in the refrigerator and has a literal shelf life of air being exposed to it, moisture, and light.
Okay, so now, all things considered, we've thrown out the white coffee filters because of the bleaching process to make them white. We've kept in play the brown, we'll call them natural coffee filters. What about the gold-plated screens? Now, dude, are you a fan of that?
It's going to collect toxins from the water. It's going to collect toxins from the coffee and abuse of light and airborne molecules, and at some point is not going to be pure anymore. And so I use an old filter that holds, plastic filter, and at some point they start to get cruddy looking, even though they're clean. I dump them and get a new one because it's just plastic. That's the other part of the problem. Better living through chemistry is not true. In fact, DuPont is tox this country and the oceans of the world because of the plastic and microplastic that is now in everything. Plastic was what DuPont invented to so-called preserve and hold foods, and everything is overpackaged, and why our dump sites are so large. Because half of what you buy at the store is packaging and overpackaging to preserve the foods, which it does not.
Mm-hmm. When you're talking about eating foods from America versus other countries, is part of the reason because America's soils are, not all of America's soils, some of them are really depleted, but for the most part, America's soils are less depleted because we've been around fewer years?
American agriculture is still the best buy per dollar spent in the world. Per dollar spent, you get more nutrient and more value in your product than anywhere else in the world. That is written in stone. American agriculture is still the best buy there is per dollar spent.
Rick, when we were looking for property to land on, which happened to be the current farm that we're on in Missouri, in the Ozark Mountains, we looked everywhere, and we wanted to find a derelict farm in a derelict area, or an area that was not really prosperous. And the reason for that is that we felt that if we could find a farm that had not really been productive as a corn growing farm, or one that has had.
That's the difference. Now, what you're doing now is making a distinction between non-storable and storable commodities. And wheat and corn and soybean and the usual suspects have been overfarmed by what we call corporate farming to be distinguished different than the small family farm. The small family farm can't afford the herbicides and pesticides, and so they are required to cultivate more rather than just do a mass flyover with an aircraft spraying and poisoning the soils. And the USDA and the FDA are, in terms of those aspects, were political agents used to protect corporate farming over the small farm. And that's why we say the loss of the small farm was the death of America. Corporate farming is quite different than non-storable commodities. That means each year your fennel has to be grown because it has a shelf life of 1 year. And that's the difference in certain kinds of spice trade to be distinguished from food. And the spice trade, whoever controlled spice trade in world history has controlled world trade. And that's when it moved from Hong Kong to British Columbia, not Hamburg. I have been in this industry to such a point, I have friends in Germany, Hamburg, that are the primary spice dealers that would deal with spices in Soviet bloc countries at that time. Bulgaria and Yugoslavia were only export. They never imported. And that was what Soviet bloc was truly all about. And it was written in stone from natural healing point of view, using herbs over extracted chemistries, that made the distinction in American agriculture. And when I say that, in Germany, they talk about standardized extract. That means they target chemistry like cordycepin as a polysaccharide in cordyceps mushrooms. However, full spectrum, when you go to get your acetylsalicylic acid out of aspen leaf and aspen bark, aspen leaf and aspen bark, you will find that it has natural buffers, and why the distinction in American agriculture now talks about full spectrum over targeted chemistries and standardized extracts. And for me, I prefer to go to a more natural source because nature has somehow provided a balance in the chemistries that when you take it from a natural source, rather than trying to hammer it with a specific target chemistry, you get better results in the terms of the way it is assimilated in the physical body. Now, that's my opinion. It doesn't mean am right, but I have been at war in terms of how things are marketed, and one of the reasons why I wrote Healing Yourself originally using natural sources. That information I came from was Dr. Shook, who originally wrote a treatise on herbology, an advanced treatise on herbology in the 30s. And when Dr. Christopher took over the Mormon head for being, the standard for herbs, he did not know goat turds from pork and beans. And really, there was a tremendous loss in herbal technology starting from culpeper and what we called, it was a way of looking at the plant to determine what it would do. Culpeper, for example, would say red clover is good for blood because it's red. Today, we know that that's because of the iron in it. And you take something like lungwort that was blue, and you say, oh, well, that's oxygen for the body. And yes, you will find there is a relationship between what the plant looks like and what part of the body it might be appropriately used. And I used that information when I first started my work in herbs, and I am the first man in history to write the physical chemistry of herbs. At that time, USDA wasn't interested in herbs, and so nobody wrote about legal highs and what was in products that were natural in nature that contained pharmaceutical drugs like morning glory seed for LSD. You see, that was why I wrote that in the first place. The magical and ritual use of herbs kept those 28 herbs out of the Uniform Controlled Substance Act because I assigned sacrament rituals to them. And, I have been at war in this area for a very, very long time, since 1970, trying to develop ways of how to increase lactation in women's breasts when they're breastfeeding. And quassia chip and things like that were lost information when Christopher took over, and the Mormons still dominate the world in terms of use in North America.
Hold that thought. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. I want to thank Kyle for being on hold for so long, and Tom in California. We'll get to both of you.
Sorry about that, guys.
Tom, we'll get to you in just a couple of minutes. Kyle, you're on with Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Welcome.
Yeah, good morning. Hey, I was going to mention to you, the other day I was doing some, reading different research stuff on my phone, and this popped up, and I started checking it out. There's a young Irish guy who senior in high school age, I think he's in college now, but that came up with the idea of magnetizing oil and when you put this magnetized oil on water, all of the plastics, the microplastics, are drawn to it like a magnet.
Yeah, and I saw that. That's really, really interesting technology, like that woman that also developed a way for bacteria, certain kinds of bacteria, to work on the plastic. We do have a serious problem with plastic now being found in everything.
Yeah, I just thought that was brilliant. He won the first prize in that prestigious world science.
To put that 15-year-old on Time magazine's cover was a typical problem with why I no longer read Time magazine or Scientific American.
Yeah,
I'm embarrassed.
It was really amazing
with the media. Now, Utni Reader is a good one that has remained semi-untarnished, but most all of the things, Cosmopolitan, Better Homes and Garden, these were all magazines that I used to contribute articles to that we're talking about fluff now. And you talk about fake news. The plastic is in everything. That is one of the more serious problems before we even start talking about weather change.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, Vince, I'll get off here. 2 quick points. One, in the water that he tested for this contest, he was able with just, a very, like maybe a 50th of the size of the volume of water, maybe that big, and he dropped it in there. The entire water went black. He was able to put the magnet on it, and it just collapsed into nothing, and or like a size of a nickel. And all of that, 88% of the microplastics were contained in that oil. And then I had just one last question for Dr. Miller. I'll just mention it real quick. What do you, when you roast coffee beans, like you buy at Costco in their plastic bag, but they've been roasted and their oils and stuff, they don't smell rancid. I was wondering, what about grinding your own beans? And then that's something I used to do, and now I've gotten older and more grumpy and don't have the yes, to grind your bean before to roast your bean that week and then grind it each day in a week is the preferred way of actually, if you lived up on Captain Cook on the jungle somewhere, that would be the correct way to do it. I now usually buy my coffee already ground, and then I regrind it to make it finer. And that alone is all I do now, and I challenge anybody to have a cup of coffee over at my house that can compete with anything they've tasted from, I don't know, Dutch Brothers, Melrose, whatever. Everybody's got their own way of doing it. Mine was based on all the years I did spices for Starbucks. All righty. Well, thank you. I'll let Tom get on here if he's got any time left. But
Kyle, just one quick comment.
Sure.
Rick and I are going to talk about eddy currents and suspending calcium in water, making water soft with just electrical current. And you mentioned electrical current and magnetism. Magnetism is what we're going to talk about with eddy currents. But it's fascinating that we're all thinking. I'm talking about instructors, or many of us are thinking about the same things at the same time. Different technologies, how to use them, but we're zeroing in on the same subject matter. Quite fascinating. Keeps happening over and over and over again. So I want to thank you.
Yeah, Vince, I could hold till after the break because I've got something on that liquid calcium that would blow your mind.
Okay, let's do that. Tom in California, you will be with us. Please stay with us. I want to hear from you, and so does our class. So we're going to go into a break. We'll be right back. Doc Ram's with us. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Kyle is with us in Montana, and Tom's going to be with us in just a couple minutes. Thank you all for holding. Kyle, you wanted to talk about calcium.
Yes. There used to be, and I don't know if it's still around anymore, a product called Coral Calcium. And you got it in these little white bags, dropped it in water, and I have some personal experience with that. My dad, many years ago, developed lung cancer, and there was a cancer on one of his lungs the size of about a walnut. Well, he went ahead and went through the radiation and burnt that part of his lung, and of course he went from 70% lung capacity to 30% lung capacity. But he was still getting around. He is still traveling. He is actually still working partially. Anyway, I heard about this, and I told Dad about it, and he started drinking this. He had put one of these little packets in like 2 quarts, if I remember correctly, of water, and I could be off on the amount. But he would drink that every day, and it sort of tasted like seawater. It was kind of a weird taste to it. He didn't really care for it, but I told him, I said, if you'll stay on this stuff, I think it'll help you. Well, he went on for 5.5 years and kept going back to the doctor, and the doctor kept checking him out because he said, at about 4 years in, he said, do you realize that you are 1/10 of 1% of people that don't have reoccurring lung cancer once you've had it once. And then, so Dad kind of got to the point where he didn't like the taste anymore, and he hated it anyway, didn't like it, the taste. And he stopped, and he started drinking pop and stuff like that. And sure enough, 6 months later, he had another lump in his other lung that was cancer as well. And that's how fast it took for it to go from the alkalinizing effect of this coral calcium to...
Coral calcium has absolutely been documented. And your father is a typical example of somebody that uses it and then stops using it. And there is a statistical thing. I do not know why allotropic medicines do not afford that. They would prefer radiation. My dad had his lung removed. Your dad was a smoker?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, that's where it all comes from smoking. And that's it. That's the bottom line. And that's why the American Cancer Society now requires a warning on all cigarettes and things related. Like vaping is another problem, just like smoking marijuana. I smoke marijuana, but the amount I smoke is like 1/10 that of a cigarette. I smoke small puffs of it throughout the day, and that seems to alter me just enough to be the creepy person I've become.
Quick question,
hey, Rick,
gentlemen.
Yeah, go ahead.
Diatomaceous earth, which is fossilized remains of.
I know. Right.
Okay, is that coral
yes,
calcium?
Yes.
So diatomaceous earth, DE.
Yes. That's another one you want in your diet. Absolutely. If you can get foods that you eat from a natural source, it's much better than supplementing.
Okay.
But I think you're asking, Vince, if diatomaceous earth is coral calcium, and it's not.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's exactly correct. And you use that in your farm practices in your garden, and watch what happens next, as opposed to getting your calcium from milk like I do. Absolutely.
So, Kyle, you're saying it's not the same. Rick, you're saying it is the same.
I'm saying it isn't, but it does have the same effects. Yes.
Okay.
Diatomaceous earth is really good for your crops in your garden.
Yes.
Kyle?
Anyway, I'll let you go, Vince. It's just that I know that the coral calcium, like I said, I don't even know if you can get it anymore. You can.
And you can get it by eating the fish. That's the part that is so cool. Eat your environment. And diatomaceous earth is different than coral calcium, but is related. And, if you're in the Midwest, use that in your garden. The diatomaceous earth will make your crops that you eat personally far better. And you'll find that at the farmer's market, many of the local growers use it.
Okay.
All righty, Vince. Hey, I've kept Tom off the air there, so I'll let him get on. And thanks again, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Merry Christmas to you, by the way.
Merry Christmas.
You too.
Thank you, Kyle. Tom in California, thank you for being so patient.
No problem. Good morning, gentlemen. Richard, how about, is there really anything organic because of the chemtrails?
The problem with chemtrails is that anything you could imagine is being put in there is absolutely correct. The fire departments are now noting that all the trees are lined with aluminum, and why the forest fires are so much hotter, including Australia. The chemtrails, I have no idea. They're trying to control the weather. And it's the first thing they did is used it as a weapon, seeing if they could cause a storm to occur during Vietnam. That's where they first started this whole process, trying to control the weather as a weapon of war. Today, they'll use it for global warming, global cooling, whatever. The whole thing is nefarious, because it's putting aluminum, barium, and lithium in everything that we eat now. And the earth itself is showing reflections of it from the insects down. The insect population today is like literally 1/3 of what it used to be when I was a child. And you can do that by the amount of flies that you saw this summer compared to how many flies you had the previous summer.
Yeah, well, I live in Ventura, California, and 2 years we had the Thomas fire, which was, I had to leave my house for about 10 days, but yeah, it was, just came out of nowhere. It was the perfect storm. It was, we had the drought, we had the wind. And
then you had the heat of the fire itself, which firefighters have never encountered previous, and that's because all the trees are now coated with aluminum. And that's what's killing our ponderosa. I was wondering what it was. Was it Fukushima? Was it this? It's chemtrails.
Yeah, I believe you. The other thing I was going to ask you is, what do you think about, or do you know about, you or Vince, the Deagle report?
Regarding,
I guess it's a military site about the next 5 years, the population.
Oh, population control. That's a New World Order agenda. And one of the reasons why there is a war going on between the Democrats and Republicans are no longer the same agencies that you and I used to think. Both were wanting the same thing for the U.S. government, U.S. population, but they wanted to do it differently. Today, there's a distinction, and what it has to do with globalism versus nationalism. And for me, I am a nationalist. I would much prefer to be uniquely different than Europe or Mexico.
Yeah, because according to the report, the year 2025, they have less than 100 million left in the United States.
Yeah, there's going to be a large. What is the difference between Texaco and Standard Oil? Oh yes, there will be blood. There will be a large kill-off done with intent to manage population control. It's wrong. Actually, you'll find that it's being natural and that men are no longer nearly as fertile and women are no longer able to get pregnant as easy.
Yeah, I have a sister who lives in Omaha, and she says last year, just baby calves, they lost over 1 million. And that's either they drowned, was buried in snow, or starved to death. So, and then I know you have said that JPL has said this was going to be the worst
winter in recorded history. It's just the beginning of a change in everything: landmass, weather, and pole shift. It's all happening cyclically. It's natural.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder why you live where you do with all the volcanoes.
There is a book that you could read called "We Are the Earthquake Generation" that will discuss the pros and cons of different parts of the United States and where one might decide to spend the last part of their life. I chose the Free State of Jefferson because I'm on essentially granite down here. You will notice in all there's if you do future map of America, Chet Snow. Chet Snow is the one the military uses as worst case scenario with Yellowstone and tsunamis. And everything west of I-5 is literally gone, and Grants Pass, where I live, becomes the new waterfront.
Oh, well, I appreciate both of your insight, and I hope you both have a good Christmas, and I'll continue to listen.
Tom, I've got a question for you. Tom, Merry Christmas as well. I have a question for you, Tom. Why is it that you listen to or are in class with us at USA Prepares? What makes that? What causes that?
But, I just accidentally ran across it maybe 4 to 6 months ago, and it's the truth, and it's common sense. It's I wish I knew what you knew about. I was a city boy, didn't learn. My father was not a fixer-up guy, and so I was more into sports than anything. But listening to you, it just amazed me. This little thing, like you're talking about coffee. You talk about so many. I've learned so much. Listen to you guys.
Tom, would you mind holding through the break?
Sure.
Okay. Tom's in California. Rick's in Oregon. I'm in the Ozarks in Missouri. This is USA Prepares. We'll be right back. RichardAllenMiller.com. RichardAlanMiller.com if you'd like to peruse the website and buy his latest offerings. RichardAllenMiller.com. Tom in California is with us, and I'm always intrigued with the answers to the questions, and I try to ask them when I can. Why do people pay attention to USA Prepares? And Tom, I want to make this comment, and I'd love to have your answer to this. I was on as a guest co-host on another network a while back, and I asked the engineer. I said, "So how are we doing?" And he was looking at ranking, and he said, "You guys, wow, you're up there with the 2 highest rated broadcasts we have." And I said, "Okay." And then he described the phenomenon that so number one, I was quite fascinated with that, because normally this particular broadcast is about politics, something that I believe you can't do anything about. We cannot fix politics. And he said that when people call into a broadcast about politics, they will stay on hold for a couple of minutes and then they hang up. You stayed on the phone for like almost 20 minutes. Kyle was on almost as long. So now the question is, what do you think and I'm asking because, and sports is another one that is popular. What is it? Why would you stay on the phone for such a long time when other people, when they are listening or trying to call into a broadcast about politics, they jump off really quickly? Why is it that you've stayed on so long? What's the difference?
Well, I would say that I'm going to get the best and the truest answer from this program. So it's worth the wait for me, because I know there's not too many people I could talk to, if any, that has the insight that you and Richard have. So to me, I'm listening to the program anyway, so I'm not missing anything. So then when it's my turn, I just pop in. So I'm going to be on the phone, because I listen to you on the phone. So
when you say you listen on the phone, do you dial a telephone number, or are you listening on the internet on your phone?
Well, sometimes both. Either, was listening on the internet, but then that's my cell phone. But then I dialed on my home phone your number.
Do you have a telephone number that you can give us? Because all the numbers that I've tried for telephone listen lines are down. They don't work. Do you have a number that you can give us that works?
Sure.
Okay.
It's 805 836 4934.
805-836-4934. Okay.
Correct.
We'll try that. We'll see if that works from here. Do you have any suggestions as to how we can make USA Prepares a better broadcast? What is it that would help you?
Oh, gosh, I think you guys are doing an amazing job. I can't think how you can improve it because everything I listen from, excuse me, it's you can't get these answers hardly anywhere else. I have listened to Richard on a couple other stations because I really enjoy listening to him. Because Thursday I never miss, and I usually I go back and I listen to your shows if it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I really enjoy all your guests, and that nurse you have on is really great. Mm-hmm. That I know you're trying to open other people's eyes to what's going on and how you were talking about changing oil. You go to these places and in 20 minutes they do it. And I remember you saying that I'll hang it up and drain it all night. Mm-hmm. These guys, so you're not really getting a good oil change. Mm-hmm. So
yeah.
But everything you're doing is right.
Well, thank you. And now that number that you gave us, was that your phone number or is that the telephone listen line number?
That's my cell number.
No. We need. Okay, I wanted to get the telephone listen line number. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Tom, I want to thank you for your call. I appreciate it. We're going to move on to David in Illinois in just a second. The number that Tom gave us is not the number to call. We have done some quick checking. Our engineer has jumped on it, and there is no telephone listen line that is up and running right now. So that is not the number that Tom gave us is not a number that you should call. Okay, that's his own number. So don't call that. I have a comment that I'd like to make, and I'd like to get Rick's thought about this, and then we'll get to David. This is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard of, but this is happening, and there are people who are selling and manufacturing this particular product, which I think should be banned from sale. And so in New Jersey, there's a New Jersey man, he was 21, he was 21 years old. And he was killed by an unoccupied Lexus vehicle. He was on 148th Street in Queens, New York, on Friday at 10 p.m. He was standing between two Lexus cars, two Model IS 300s. He was standing between two of them, and they were parked. And it sounds like they were parked parallel, meaning one behind the other. And one of them started up and crashed into him. Now, who would think that a vehicle would start up all by itself when you're standing between them? Let's say you're going to cross the street, okay? You walk between two parked cars from the sidewalk, and you walk between them, or you stand between them, or maybe you're hailing a cab, okay? And one of them starts up, moves, and kills you. So, why did that happen? Well, it really sounds like the owner had installed, or had someone else install, a remote start. A remote start. Why? Why would anybody start a vehicle when they're not in it? Tell me why. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. And it's been going on for years. And people will spend, I don't know, maybe $150 plus installation to get one of these idiotic devices installed. They're a menace to everyone around the vehicle. Oh, it's cool. Wow, you don't have to go out in the cold. You can start your car and let it warm up. Really? Really? people don't have the ability to go out to their vehicle, make sure it's safe, make sure there's no cats under the hood, no animals that are going to be killed? Well, obviously, someone who installed this didn't install it right, because there's a security system on the car anyway. You know, a vehicle would normally not start unless it's in park. And most vehicles, your foot has to be on the brake in order to get it out of park. Most vehicles. So this thing lurched forward and killed a guy standing between two cars because some moron thought it was a great idea to have a remote start. When I say we're going down, and we're going down by the sum of all individual greed and individual stupidity, this is a prime example of individual stupidity. Carelessness, recklessness, no concern for anybody else. Normally, a normal, I can't forget normal, one of us, one of USA prepares. When we get in our vehicles, we walk around them, we look to see if we have a flat tire, we look to see if there's any anomalies, we look to see if there are any fluid leaks, we look to see if there's any hazards, we look to see if we're going to injure somebody, we look in the front seat, the back seat, all that stuff. Not this guy. This guy has technology. Hits a button, starts the car, and remotely kills somebody. Now, why is that? It's because when you go to hook up one of these remote starts, it's complicated. If you look under the dashboard of a vehicle, there is a rat's nest of wires. All multicultural wires. Every different color you could possibly think of. Some have stripes, some have brown stripes, green stripes, red stripes, black stripes, blue stripes, gray stripes, orange stripes. And then there's the orange, blue, the gray. I mean, every color you can, every combination. Hundreds of wires. And it's possible that the guy who installed this, you know what, we're not going to worry about being in park and all those safety features. We'll just hook this thing up to start the engine. And off it went and killed somebody, a 21-year-old. Everybody involved in that, from the guy who installed it to the guy who pushed the button, ought to be on trial. Every single one of them. This has got to stop. Remote starts. You really need that? You really need a remote start? David, you're on with Dr. Richard Allen Miller and me. I'm angry. I am livid. Needless death. This guy was crushed. David?
Hello?
Hey, you're on.
Okay. I just said I'm scared to go out anywhere with people in the vehicles nowadays. Now I got to worry about them not being in the cars.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, seriously.
Right.
A friend of mine took me, I'll tell you real quick, a friend of mine took me for a ride in his truck, got a new truck. We were up high. He said, you can't see this lady next to me, but she's here. She's using her knees to drive the steering wheel. She has her makeup in one hand and she had a drink in the other. You know, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So now I originally called to ask some other question, but I'll comment about this remote start situation. Years ago, I was listening to these two brothers that work for MIT, and they helped. They said they designed that, but it was designed for something else, and they said that was the worst thing they ever could have done, was to design that remote start. And I was surprised. They had their own car show. I think it was called Car Talk.
Click and Clack. Tom and Ray Magliazzi. Yeah.
Those are
Tom,
guys.
let me make a comment about those two guys. So for those of you who have listened to National Public Radio, you've heard Click and Clack, the Tappet brothers, high atop Car Talk Plaza. Two guys had a garage, and yes, they were from MIT, or one of them was. One of them was an instructor at MIT. And they had this garage, and people would come to their garage to change their oil and, make repairs because they had a garage with lifts, and they would rent that bay, and you could, drive in there, rent the bay by the hour or however they rented it. And if you needed help, these guys were around. They could say, no, you don't. No, take these other 3 bolts off. No, you do it this way. And so they'd be there for moral and technical support for the people who were renting the bays. And then they found out that, well, it really wasn't such a great idea because people had no idea what they were doing. And, of course, I'm paraphrasing. And so they did the work for the customers. And as a matter of advertisement, they had this car show, and they talked about cars and car repair. And I called them one day because, I thought it was live. No. I called them, and I wanted to tell them that I had solved the problem with the 1994 model Chevrolet 6.5 turbo diesel vehicle, and why it would just shut down. Driving along, all of a sudden the engine would just quit. And when that quit, you'd lose the power brakes, you'd lose the power steering. It was a mess. And it was like a spontaneous bang, it would happen. And people didn't understand why it was happening. And the dealers would say, no, it's Finelli, it's just you. You're the only one. Nobody in the country has this problem. And they go, oh, yeah? Really? Well, we have a blue Blazer, 1994 6.5 turbo diesel. It does it. We have a red Blazer, 1994 6.5 turbo diesel. It does it. And we have a blue Suburban 1994 6.5 turbo diesel, and it does it. All 3 of them do it. It's not just one vehicle. Well, what happened was General Motors finally had to admit that this was a serious problem. And they extended the warranty of that particular vehicle to, I think, 11 years and 110,000 miles. That was unheard of, right? This thing was plagued. And I want to tell you, those of you who want to know what happened, I'll tell you the quick version. So those vehicles with the dashboard instrument option of oil pressure gauge, temperature gauge, those kinds of things, battery charging gauge. Well, what General Motors did was they put a sensor, an oil pressure sensor or an oil pressure sender, in one of the oil galleries on the back of the top of the engine. And what would happen is when you started your vehicle, you would have oil pressure. And the idea was if the vehicle was in a collision, they didn't want this oil, this fuel pump, this lift-up pump that would pull fuel out of the fuel tank and push it up to the diesel injection pump. They didn't want that thing running and spilling fuel all over the road and making a bigger fire than would normally be made with a crash. So what they did was they said, if the engine doesn't have oil pressure, then we'll shut off the fuel pump, the lift-up pump, to pump fuel from the fuel tank. And they stuck that in the same sender as the oil pressure gauge on the dashboard. So the oil pressure sender had 2 functions. One, to indicate the oil pressure of the engine, and the other was to turn on the electric fuel pump. Well, the contacts were too small to carry the current from the fuel pump. So that part of the fuel sender would burn out. But the oil pressure gauge would work. So people would think, well, it can't be that because the oil pressure gauge works on the dashboard. And that's what I discovered. So I called Click and Clack to say, hey, I know what the problem is. And what I found out was that they take calls, they call you back, and they talk to you off the air. They put together the program off the air and play it as if it's live. So if you wonder how come they know the answers, because it's not live. That's my opinion on Click and Clack, and I'm sorry that one of them had died because it was a great show. It really was a great show. It was full of humor and some car information. Back to you, David.
Yeah. Quick comment, real quick about them. Though I was surprised back then. I haven't listened to them a long, long time. They were even encouraging people to forget about new cars. Get old ones. Find an old engine. Get a car. Old car. Don't get a new one. I was surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
I was going to ask Dr. Miller about a chemtrail situation.
Okay. And I have one other question for him as well, and that is about eddy currents and using eddy currents to soften water. I've got a device with a coil of wire, and I want to try it on some plastic plumbing to see if it actually does work. I would like to know what his thoughts are. We'll be right back with David in Illinois. David, we'll have to go quickly. Please ask your question about chemtrails.
Yes, I just have a question. All the federal people I was around, well, first of all, they always called it seeding the atmosphere. But what I was wanting to know is, did Dr. Miller ever work in any of those in departments that was, implementing that?
No, I never got into those areas. My primary areas of expertise was in the paranormal. Weird phenomena that had outside. There was no explanation from laws of physics. That's when I became A-team, trying to figure out what was going on. Actually, we never really did very much in that regard. We caught a lot of flies with our mouth open in disbelief. I have seen things. I have no clue what it means yet, even today. In terms of synthetic telepathy, early mind wars, yes, I participated in weapons development in that area, but in regard to air and chemtrails, I'm as clueless as you are as to why they're doing it. And the fact that the public is not aware of why they're doing it and what and who is doing it leaves me to suspect there's more going on than we really are being allowed to know.
Well, the reason I asked this question really quick is because if you did have worked with it, I'm just wondering how you get away with them not having helicopters over your house, or you're under surveillance all the time. Like
I have stalkers in the woods, and yes, my life is not the same because of who and what I've become. No,
because
just like in the movies, all of the above.
Whenever I've seen them mention the things that I know, whenever I've seen them mention these situations, people say, "You're not supposed to talk about this on the radio." And next thing you know, I got a helicopter over my house at midnight, or a car's parked out for weeks. So
yeah, I wish they had given me that suit that they have of the Men in Black. The ones where I never need another suit. I never got one of those.
But one other question, statement, real quick. When I was learning the Constitution and I was with all the police, in the feds, they would ask me why am I doing that, and it was requirements. So finally, they said, we don't even monitor that. We don't care what that says. You got to get that through your head. And so one day I finally said around all those guys, I said, so basically what you're telling me is we have an elected dictatorship. And all those Fed guys said, I think your son's finally getting it. So I just leave you with that statement.
I would change one letter in what. Yeah. Merry Christmas, David. I would change one letter in what you said. I would change elected to selected with an S.
Thank you. Have a nice time.
Yeah. Right. Yes, sir.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, David. Rick, eddy currents and water softening. So there's this belief, and I have not hooked it up yet, but a device to create eddy currents. It's like $10 worth of parts, and a coil or a length of wire wrapped around a water pipe to suspend calcium. Have you experimented with that?
Yes, I have.
Or have you read about it?
Hard water over soft water is the minerals that are in it. And in fact, I much prefer, believe it or not, I like hard water because I like the minerals. This is one of the areas where well water is superior to city water that has been cleaned and sanitized. And hard water in that regard will plug pipes, will cause difficulties. The water coming out of North Dakota and South Dakota comes out white because of the calcium. And is that good or bad? Yes, it has both sides to it, and will clog your pipes. And yes, you can use eddy currents to clean your water. What I would prefer is not you to be so much concerned about those minerals as the structure of the water itself. And that is simply done by whatever container you put water in, you put it in clockwise. And just that alone changes how the water is assimilated in the body. Instead of going directly to urine, now, just by putting the water clockwise in the cup that you're going to drink out of, will cause 60% of it, minimum, to be absorbed by the body and used literally as water.
So,
the minerals.
So Rick, I've got a question an implementation type question. So I can fabricate a device to spin the water in the pipes. I can spin the water in the pipes clockwise.
Do it.
Let's say kind of like a rifle twist. It will?
Yes, sir. It will make a major difference in the quality of your life right out of the gate. Just that alone.
All right. So kind of like rifling in a barrel. I can do this, and I can experiment with this, and I could probably put I don't know.
Now, by the way, that's only
4
good
twists
for the northern hemisphere. The southern hemisphere would be the exact opposite.
So if I could put 4 twists per foot, is that enough, do you think?
Sure. Just enough that you have it going into your cup differently. Yes.
All right. We're out of time. Rick, thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Yeah, richardallenmiller.com.